Thank you for tuning into SBI's Reimagining Main Street podcast. I'm Patrick Lee, CEO of SBI.
And I'm Laura Richards, COO of SBI. At SBI, we stand firm in our conviction that Main Street is rightfully the heart of the American economic system. Success is measured by each individual thriving small business. Therefore, we work one business at a time to reimagine Main Street.
And that's actually a great line for segueing into our topic today, which is what should small business owners be doing as they attempt to reimagine their businesses, as they look at what comes next. I think we've been through a couple of cycles here through this whole coronavirus pandemic of folks first panicking, right? Being instructed by government what to do, stay at home, close down, whatever, and everyone following the rules because they don't know what it looks like. Then there's the immediate tasks that need to be done. We need to get some loan documents in for a PPP loan or for whatever. And so folks all had a purpose. Is okay, we know we got to get this in, got to talk to our bank, got to send it in. But now everything's sort of settling into this new norm that doesn't suit the business owner, right? This is not a good place to be. And they're on edge. Like, what should they be doing right now?
I think that's exactly right, Patrick. And you and I have talked a lot about what are those next steps. And one of the things that you said is, I think, is a great place to start is, what do we want to look like at the end of this? And how do we figure that out?
And I think it's interesting because I keep talking about this whole thing as being a opportunity in terms of it being a reset button. Right? Like, how often do we all want to get off the train we're on, just stand at the station for a few minutes, get our bearings, and then decide if we want to get on that train or a different train or what speed, but we can never get off the train. It's just barreling along. This has done that forced stop where the train has stopped, and we have a whole bunch of reinventions available to us. And I think it's interesting because I think we're all reinventing personally, right? We're at home with our families. We're seeing a lot more of them than maybe we wanted. I mean, I've seen a whole bunch of funny videos about how the pets that are at home that aren't used to having the humans around so much are starting to wig out too, right? So we've got our whole personal reinvention piece over here. We've got this societal reinvention. Are people ever going to shake hands again, or are we just going to bump elbows, right? But for the small business owner, I think there's two reinventions, and it kind of falls into what we were talking about earlier, Laura, was this, like, we have two different sort of streams or topics or themes of conversation that we find ourselves in. And one is, the individual business. Like, how do you go about reinventing? What should you be doing during these times to take your business and get it ready to go again, recraft it, whatever that might be. But then there's a bigger picture. And that bigger picture for me is, we're all learning real quickly here that Main Street small business economy is the bastard stepchild, right? We exist just to keep a few people employed. We're a cog in the machine of a whole bunch of others, and they don't understand us, and they don't know how to cater to us at all. I don't think they think we're that important, truthfully. And apparently we don't have a lot of influence over them because they're not that worried about us. So is there a way for Main Street business as a unit to reimagine itself?
And I think that leads back to both of those areas of thought. To now that the status quo has been disrupted, it's already changes in the air, and we have an opportunity to have people's attention. So we can reinvent the way in which small businesses affect change and compete for mind share with corporations. And I think that's one of the things that we are trying to examine is, how does small business do that? Even with the PPP, we're hearing about big businesses that took money that, in my mind, they shouldn't have, that should have gone to small business, and even small businesses that took money that maybe they didn't need. there's a lot of reshaping that needs to happen, not only to bring small business to the consciousness of and to be an influencer in a bigger way. But there's an opportunity here because of the disruption. So how do we leverage that?
Well, I think there's a couple things we all need to sort of get used to, and that is that we need to become imaginative, and we need to have a say in what happens next. So one of the things that I've watched a lot is that people will observe something and they'll be potentially unhappy with what they've observed, right? So that's where you get the whole thing of protesting something or railing against something that you believe is wrong. But a lot of times when that happens, it's saying no, but you're not providing the alternative. And I think that a lot of small business owners are saying, hey, that's not fair. And that's where the sentence ends. Hey, that's not fair. Okay. But we're still waiting to be told what to do. We're not inventing it. We're not influencing it. We're being told what to do while we yell and scream that it's not fair. And I think we need to get past that. And in order to do that, I think we need to believe, number one, that what we imagine, what we reinvent can actually happen. That we can't feel powerless or just go with the current because it's not worth fighting. And we can't also be so on our own island that we don't recognize that every one of us small business entrepreneurs, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, whether you're 65 or 32, whether you're a man, a woman, whatever, none of those things matter. There is a commonality around being a small business owner that should provide connective tissue so that we can work together to try to enact a different starting point when this whole thing ramps up again. What do we want to see different? I'm going to take a minute here, and this is going to go against all the best practices of podcasting. Okay. And I'm holding a book called Secrets to a Successful Startup by Trevor Blake. So anybody who hasn't seen or heard of Trevor Blake, 3 Simple Steps was his first book. This is his current one. He's extremely interesting and successful fellow, got a lot of good insights. I'm actually going to take, and I want everyone to just bear with me. I'm going to take 2 minutes and I'm going to read a passage that's a little bit long, but I think it really kind of sets this whole thing up. So here we go. It's called the Razz Conundrum, and that's RAS. We focus on what's urgent and important for survival. Every second, our brains are bombarded with about 2 million bits of data from our senses and nervous system. That's more information than we can process into conscious thoughts. And so our brains have developed a system for filtering and prioritizing information. If our brains didn't do this, our consciousness would be overwhelmed and we'd be too overloaded to make decisions. The part of the brain that handles this function is called the reticular activating system, or RAS. Psychologist Jerome Bruner said that the inhibitory system of the RAS routinely and automatically removes from perception, reason, and judgment over 99% of available fact. Through various neural paths, the RAS connects the brain stem to the cerebral cortex. The brain stem controls many involuntary functions and bodily reflexes, while the cerebral cortex is believed to be the seat of consciousness and thinking abilities. The RAS links these two regions and helps our consciousness focus on what's most important or urgent in any particular moment, according to the belief system we have developed since birth. This is essential, but it's also a double-edged sword. Out of those 2 million bits of data we receive every second, we only have the capacity to process around 147 bits. Pause for a second to digest that. As Bruner said, our RAS filters out nearly everything we experience, more than 99.99%, and hides it from our awareness. This is a conundrum. In every moment, we are blissfully unaware of almost all of the world around us. The RAS filters out whatever we have decided through learned beliefs or mental habit is not important, and it allows into consciousness only whatever seems most relevant or needs immediate action. Because of the way the RAS function, it's difficult to change repetitive or habitual thoughts, behaviors, and experiences. Yet it's possible by deliberately changing what we focus on. Bit by bit, we can reprogram our Razz and gradually change the world we experience. Instead of letting a winning idea fade, we deliberately feed the Razz a new goal by incorporating the idea immediately. This is not positive thinking, it's positive reaction, and that makes all the difference. So anyway, the idea that we, by the nature of how our brains work, put inhibitors in place, and we can only see confirming data that confirms our already present belief system and how we see the world. So when we look at reimagining the economy, it's hard to do, right? Because it seems huge. We only know what we know. Every reactive thing that we do when we're reacting within our business to make things happen is done based on this premise of understanding that we have. It's tough to step off a ledge and, you don't have any idea what's there.
I think that's a good point. I think also what's inherent in what you just read is that we see what we're used to seeing. So to envision something new, you have to have a driver, and coronavirus could be that driver right now.
Well, I think that's that's the main takeaway of everything here, is that this reset is a forced reset. How often do we all walk around going, yeah, I'm going to sit down and redesign that and reimagine that. I'm going to start my new habits on Monday, and all of that stuff that we say that we're going to do, and then we don't do it because our subconscious, our Razz, or whatever, we're just in our patterns, and it's hard not to pay attention to what's noisy and in front of you. And I think that that whole concept of a fear-based push to make you do something is really intriguing. I have had companies that we've turned around by removing all vestiges of what was known in that company, like where the desks were that people sat, what the entranceway looked like, how the place was laid out, what the technology was, literally wiped the floor clean. When they came in on Monday after a weekend, everything had changed. And because there's nothing grounding you that you can hold on to protect the status quo, because you're not stuck, knowing, well, wait a minute, let me just go sit down at my desk and get my bearings. No, you can't get your bearings. It's time to spin around a little bit and get used to feeling uncomfortable and figure out, what should this be? And that's where Small Business Main Street is right this second. We can do that, and we kind of have to. This isn't business as usual.
And I think that brings it to the point of figuring out individually for each business is what that looks like. And I know that's something that you and I are going to delve into in future weeks. And I already have a guest in mind that is a great representation of how you can shift when things like this happen, to not just make minor tweaks in your business, but to make radical change in your business that makes you look really different when you come out on the other side.
Absolutely. And I think there's going to be some industries where this is a forced thing, like restaurants right now, and how they reopen, and what is the cost of a meal, because you're going to have social distancing in place. You can't fill your space the same way. And what does that look like? And I think there's a whole bunch of industries that there's going to be some forced reinvention, but I would caution folks who think that they're just going to okay, it's over now, I go back to business as usual. You really probably shouldn't do that. You may be able to do that, but take this opportunity to look at what we've learned here. There's a whole bunch of things that have started to be forced on us, from getting used to technologies that we may not have been willing to embrace, such as Zoom and all the remote access. Those are obvious ones, but there's a whole lot of other things going on here, including our relationship with our vendors, our landlords, our banks. I mean, there is there is the ability right now to begin to reimagine, even if it's not needed. Like let's get creative and see if there's a way to optimize or perfect what we have or completely reinvent it. The forgiveness because of this pandemic that's going to be out there for small business, there may not be a financial forgiveness, but the forgiveness of trying something different, of being inventive, of not following what everybody's used to, that forgiveness is going to be widespread. You have an opportunity to go ahead and, look a little funny for a bit and see what happens.
So aside from seeking out someone to help you determine what direction to go in and how to move this way or that way as a small business, entrepreneur, what kind of recommendations for change prescriptively do you have in a broad sense?
So let's pop that back to you for a second, because there's one particular business in Annapolis that has done a bunch of super creative things that let's talk about a little bit, because when I look at what they've done, they didn't do anything they couldn't have already done before. And they may have done these things because they had no choice, but how many things will stick? What did they learn from doing those things? What does that show us about how innovation and new revenue streams and new ways of approaching your customers, what does that tell us the need for constantly testing is? So talk about that place.
Sure. So I was telling you a little while ago that there's a local business here, and honestly, I had not patronized it prior to the pandemic. It's Old Fox Books and Brown Mustache Coffee, and they're actually two separate businesses, and they're in the same building in historic downtown Annapolis on Maryland Avenue. And they have a clever use of social media and have come up with clever ways to repackage what they were already doing and get it in front of the public. So in the case of Old Fox Books, they have presented their products in a number of different ways, from creating a weekly kind of merchandise table that they take a picture of and they put on social media. And maybe you see, for example, I bought a botanical puzzle because I thought, well, this is great. I can do a jigsaw puzzle with my family while I'm quarantined. And you call them over the phone and you tell them what of the table looked good. And I also got the new book by Glennon Doyle called Untamed, because I saw it laying on their merchandise table in the picture on Facebook, and I need to read something too. And then I called and placed the order. To pick up the order, I visited Brown Mustache Coffee, and they had an outdoor deck, and the deck happened to have two windows, and the windows led into the coffee shop. So when they were forced to close, they opened the window, set out a little bar there, and they're selling coffee straight to customers onto the deck from this pass-through window, making it completely contact-free. We're all wearing our masks, and they, have managed it that way and cultivated a new following in addition to their regular customers who they continue to serve. So the synergies there are really cool because it's between two businesses, trying to figure out how to help each other during this time, and evolving the way market forces are making them evolve, but really thinking, out of the box and working their way to find some new normal.
Yeah, and so what's really intriguing about that is they didn't necessarily get any new products or services. They just started repackaging what those things were. They started recognizing, okay, people still want their coffee. They need some sort of entertainment. Everybody is starting to think that they're going to do some things maybe they didn't do. Like, okay, I'm in quarantine. Maybe I should start reading again because I haven't read a book in years, right? Or, maybe we should all sit around the table instead of playing on our devices and put together a puzzle, right? So they started packaging these things because of the environment and making them appealing. And you told me the one about how you could also get like a mystery package where you don't know what book you're going to get, or it's a surprise. Like, let's see what we got.
They called it a blind date with a book.
A blind date with a book. I mean, that's super creative, and it's not stepping so far off of what you know that you're unmoored and this is just like a random experiment. It's something you do know in a different way. It gives you context that you can compare to. And so I promise you that some of the things they've invented aren't going to go away even when things come back to some sort of normalcy, but some of them are. Some of these things they're going to have found out, it was kind of a cool idea. It didn't take at all, but this and this really worked. And now it's a staple of what we do. So for those of you who have stayed in the same manner as always, if you're a restaurant, like you've never changed your menu, you don't have specials, right? Or if you're another business that, here's how folks get processed in our business, period. You follow this list. Now's the time to look at it and go, does that list need to have 12 things on it, or can we do it in 8 and be more efficient? And does our clients actually appreciate number 7? Because I think we can get that information differently than what we put them through, et cetera, et cetera. Just going through the process of trying reinvention right now will give you data that informs what does and doesn't work. And like I said, a lot of times we don't do that stuff because we don't think we're allowed to, or it's going to shake things up, or our clients aren't going to be happy. The amount of forgiveness right now available to you as a business owner as you try to figure this out is infinite. It's infinite right now. So use it.
I think that's a perfect place to end it for today. Patrick will be back with a guest on our next episode. And anything you want to say in wrapping up?
Only that this went fairly well. So thank you all for joining us. We're a little bit of neophytes on this whole podcasting thing. Hopefully you're going to be watching a whole bunch of us and we'll be old hands at this in the near future.
Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Reimagining Main Street.